All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Joaquin Esquivel, Chair of the State Water Resources Control Board. Today is Tuesday, February 4th. It is 9:06 a.m., and I'd like to call this meeting to order. This morning, before we get into public forum, we'll actually kick off today with a Superior Accomplishment Award, Sustained Superior Accomplishment Award that will be presented here by Mr. Greg Gearhart.
Board for Bev. So first of all, I want to acknowledge Bev Anderson-Abbs, senior environmental scientist who's retiring. So we don't have the actual award, but because of Bev's retirement and timing, we're having this ceremony today. So I appreciate your time and indulgence in this. So Bev has spent, over 10 years at the State Water Board, but has a career of public service. She goes back to working on bank swallows and teaching kids and doing all sorts of other things before she came to the water board. But for sure, the last 10 years at the water board, Bev has made a dramatic difference in our data infrastructure. A lot of people think about the performance report as the shiny things that are on our web pages that tell us the stories about the work that we do and the resources. But Bev not only did that, but she helped build this amazing new network of data and pipelines that go to these report cards, improving the quality, improving the efficiency, and all that other work. So I really appreciate all of the time and effort that Bev has put into improving the services that we provide. I'm a true believer, if you don't know, in open data as a form of open government. And our performance report lives that value. It really does demonstrate the capacity to not only tell the story, but show your work behind the scenes. And so with Bev's work and her dedication to making it not only a good report, but a good system, we have a much better place for our folks in California and the waters. So thank you, Bev, very much. And here's your imaginary award.
Thank you, Greg. I'd just like to say a couple of things. As Greg mentioned, I've been here at the water boards for 10 years now. And the opportunities that I've been presented with while I've been here have just been amazing and an incredible growth experience. When I first started here at the water boards, I was in Swamp working on the HABs, the Harmful Algal Bloom program, and just had some amazing people throughout the state to work with, from Karen Taberski in Region 2 and Karen Worcester in Region 3, John Marshak here at the water boards. Just it made it so much easier to be able to do the things that we did and get that HABs program up where it's now running, and it's just a beautiful system and gives us a lot of really good information and data. And then I transitioned into the performance reports and spent several years fumbling and trying to figure out what I was doing and where everything was. But again, with the people that were around, working with everyone throughout the state, I had to learn all of the databases and how to connect to them and what everyone's data meant. And we've spent the last 8 years working on that and getting some really good connections, improving the data quality that we have throughout the water boards, and it's just been an amazing experience. So I'm glad that this is the apex of my career, and I'm ready to move on and start doing fun things and travel and carry on with my life. So thank you, Greg. It has been a good opportunity. I've appreciated the latitude you've given me to run with scissors in many cases, and it's been a great learning experience.
Well, it's been a joy working with you. I should mention that the reason it got done as well as it did is because Bev is an amazing human diplomat as well. So we often even had to call her into projects that weren't related to the performance report to smooth over ruffled feathers with people, because that's really one of her underlying base skills. It's amazing, top notch. So it's been a pleasure working for you, with you, and as your supervisor.
Thank you.
I'll just say, incredibly well-deserved, Bev. I'm definitely a data evangelist too here, but you're in the trenches and have been. And when I think of the performance report, when I think of the transparency it brings to the institution, and importantly, it's not easy often to be able to really articulate all the work that goes on at the water boards. But you have contributed mightily to that. You're definitely a data diplomat amongst it. And so just thank you for that incredible service. The system that you've set up now around the performance report will definitely continue to live on and grow. And it's an incredible foundation that we're just very fortunate that you've brought to us. So just so well deserved. And just thank you. Much appreciated, Bev. Ms. Chicazola, please.
Hi, thank you for letting me speak this morning. I'll be very brief to not take much of your time. But I just wanted to really encourage this board to move forward with any processes that are possible to provide protections from the Trinity River at this time. And the reason why is based on several factors, but one of them, the new Trump executive orders on California water. Besides the fact that they're very disturbing, that there's, threats of having the other people take over California's water and take away the rights of this board and other people in the state to decide water issues in order to maximize deliveries, including at times a year they're not needed. But you all are very aware that it's weird politics. But this board does have a lot of power to protect our watersheds, as you know. And we have some concerns that as part of the Bay Delta plan that there's not actually protections for carryover storage in the Trinity River. And we realize the Trinity River isn't the main subject of the Bay Delta plan. However, the Trinity River is diverted into the Bay Delta water systems. And therefore, voluntary agreements and things that happen in the Sacramento side do really impact the river. And we've brought up several times that we feel like under water rights order 90-5, I believe it is, that there's possible protections for temperatures in the Trinity. But I think, and I've heard from the board that maybe there needs to be some separate processes around temperature protections and water rights on the Trinity River side. As you're aware, the Hoopa and Yurok tribes have fishing rights on the Klamath River and water rights on the Trinity River. And right now, because there's no protection for carryover storage during multi-year droughts, the water to protect the salmon are not actually stored. And in the Bay Delta plan, we are talking about storage issues, but not necessarily for the Trinity side, which leaves us with questions. Will the Trinity River then be diverted to help deal with things like voluntary agreements? And just random assurances that they're not, it doesn't feel like enough. The Trinity River has been used to stop Klamath River fish kills. I think that hopefully after a few years of dam removal, there'll be less issues with temperature-related fish kills in the Klamath. But for now, that water is not only really needed to protect the drinking water for people who live on the Trinity River, but also the salmon in the Trinity River and in the Klamath River. Anyway, so I'll try to be quick, like I said. And then beyond that, I just wanted to encourage this board to do everything possible to protect the salmon at this time where they are really under attack. And to protect what water is in our river systems, especially in times of year that we have unallocated water, and there's not protections. I think the importance of the Bay Delta plan is very much shown in the politics of the time. And I just wanted to make sure that this board knows how critically important it is at this time and juncture in history. But the basis of my comments were mainly on this Trinity River issues, and thank you very much.
Thank you as well, Ms. Chicazola. Appreciate your comments here and addressing the board, and definitely do feel the urgency on the Bay Delta plan and all of these issues. So just thank you. Appreciate your words this morning. Brings us to our first item of board business, which is consideration of the board meeting minutes from January 22nd. Board meeting minutes are adopted. Next, we are moving on to item number 2, and it is around current hydrologic conditions and response.
All right. Good morning, Chair Esquivel, board members.
Bit of shift in the weather.
Yes, substantially. So I'm going to do a brief current hydrologic update for you today. We're going to talk about current statewide hydrology, which is changing by the minute. And then talk about the Scott and Shasta rivers, a little bit about groundwater recharge, and then an update on water rights annual reporting. So this is the total precipitation as of February 1st, which has actually changed even by a day. So when we looked at, these are always a little bit behind when they're posted online, but this is your statewide precipitation, which was at 85% of average for the year as of the 1st of February, and it was up to, I believe, 115% a month before that. So that's a pretty substantial change. We dropped quite a bit. And then on the 2nd, it was up to 90%. So it's ticking up with these storms, which is great to see, but still maintaining that shift where you're getting a lot of the rain clearly up north, and then it tapers off as we go south. So again, digging it a little deeper, looking at the Sierra precipitation indexes. This is the Northern Sierra. You can see here we're at 114% of average, and this was as of yesterday. And we're following that little dark blue line where it says current 32.2. So if you can mind that right there. I know there's a lot of lines here. We're comparing this to a lot of different water years, you can see. As we move again, a little bit south, now we're down to 53% of average. And again, it's worth noting that, statewide and then in these different indices, we saw a drop of about 20 to 30 percentage points, really depending on where we are in the various systems. But those are ticking up a bit as we're getting some of the rain. Okay, and then in the Tulare area, we're at 48%, and you can see down again that little blue line is fairly low. So we're just going to continue to watch to see what happens as these storms continue. Okay, so looking at our snowpack, again, you can see if you look in the northern area, we're at 101% of normal for the year, and then follows the same pattern as we start moving our way south. We have 64% of normal in the central, and then 46% of normal in the southern area. And if you look statewide, that brings us to a percent of normal as 69%. And if you can bear with me, it was 106% a month ago, which again, it's been very dry. We would expect to see that drop down. It's going to be getting colder as the current storms pass us, and we're really hoping to see quite a bit more snow added to the snowpacks. So when we check back in again next time, hopefully we will see an increase there. Quickly, just touching on our major reservoirs, they are all at or above average. Okay, so jumping into to the regional response for the Scott and Shasta rivers, the readopt emergency regulation did go into effect on the 27th, January 27th, and that is good for 1 year. Right now, the curtailments are suspended on both the Shasta and the Scott. The flows as of 6:30 this morning for the Wairika gauge were 1,950 CFS, and for the Fort Jones gauge, they were 3,750 CFS, so well above the minimum flow requirements for both of those. Noting for the Shasta, the snowpack on February 3rd was 128% of the February 1st and 79% of April 1st averages. And then for the Scott, the snowpack was 104% for February 1st and 65% of April 1st average. And just as a reminder, those get tracked a little differently. They look at snow water content, and they do that monthly, I believe. And then you can see that here that through mid to end of December, the adult fish that were counted in both of those rivers are listed here. So Chinook, Coho, and Steelhead. And we are planning on a groundwater local cooperative solutions public meeting in February. It's looking like February 25th in Etna. And more information can be found on our website about that. So we'll just briefly look at these, the graphs, which you're familiar with. The red line is the emergency minimum flows. The green bars would be precipitation events. And then the blue line would be the flows, in this case, at the Fort Jones gauge. And you can see they are well above the minimum requirement. And for the Shasta River, we're tracking the Wairika flow gauge. And again, you can see them following the storm events peaking up and then staying above that emergency flow line. All right, briefly, before we jump into the groundwater recharge temporary permits, I did want to mention before we leave the regional section is there was a request last month to at some point do a Colorado River update. And we have reached out to the Colorado River Board. Chris Harris, who has been here before to speak with you, has retired. And so we're now working with them to find a good time to have somebody come out and do that, looking like sometime in the spring, maybe May-ish is what we're looking at, but we're going to coordinate with them a little bit more and get back to you on that. So for groundwater recharge temporary permits, all applications that we have received have been issued. There have been 6. They're listed here. The bit.ly link at the bottom of this slide allows folks to go and take a look and get the specifics on those temporary permits, but I just want to give note that our team really pushed hard to get those all issued in a timely manner. So very proud of staff for doing that.
Really appreciate that note and appreciate the great work I know that folks have been doing to process all those applications. Just wondering if there are any pending at this point, or we see any others from folks, very late here in the season, looking to get in there.
No, we received 6 and we processed 6.
Yep. Fantastic. Thank
you. Also, there was an executive order issued on the 31st regarding groundwater recharge. And just as a brief overview, it makes it easier for local and regional agencies to use existing laws to maximize groundwater recharge. And this is building on the 2023 executive orders and then the subsequent legislation that supported the use of stormwater flows for groundwater recharge. The executive order ensures Department of Water Resources and other state agencies are taking full advantage of upcoming winter storms. It's worth noting that local agencies or regional agencies who are going to make use of this provision, they have to notify the board within 48 hours that they're going to be doing that. We have not received any notifications as of today. Okay, and just briefly want to touch on the water rights annual reports. This will be my last topic for the 23-24 water year. Those reports were due a few days ago on February 1st. Also want to note that the late reporting fees for the post-1914 appropriative right holders accrue after 30 days. And I have the table of fees here just as a reminder that depending on the size of the water right and the number of days late determines how much that fee is going to be. So you can take a look in that third column, that 31 to 60 days late. That's going to be the first ones that would accrue. So folks still have some time to get the no late fee in there. But I do want to note that as a whole, 44% of water right holders and claimants have not reported as of February 3rd. We're going to break that down slightly. So the outstanding water rights, those that have still not reported here, are in blue. And we've broken these down by the type of water right for a couple different reasons. You can see we have federal claims and stock ponds, groundwater recordation, other stock ponds and registrations there at the top. These make up a smaller percentage of the total water rights, maybe about 25% of what we're looking at. And you can see that the compliance, or in this case, the outstanding water rights, varies depending on them, but this breaks it down a little bit. But what I want to focus in on, if you could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. There we go. Just to take a look here at the riparian and pre-1914 claims, and then your post-1914 appropriatives. And those are really the ones we're going to focus in on as we provide information and updates going forward, because they make up the bulk of our water rights. But you can see here that our claims are 54% have not reported, whereas the post-1914s were at about 38%. So there's a shift there, worth noting, because those post-1914s are the ones that are subject to the late fees. And so we'll be, tracking those to see, how that looks and how that applies going forward. I did chat with the reporting team before this presentation, and they noted that we really do receive quite a few more reports in that 30-day window. So we should expect to see these numbers decrease. After that, there'll be a question. So,
can I ask, do you know off the top of your head where we ended up with the 22-23 water year with folks?
I had a feeling this might be asked, and then I just forgot to look. But I want to say it was at about 33. But I'm hesitant to lean on that. But I don't think it changed dramatically from, we had kind of touched on it. We were seeing a few shifting, but I think it was around that 30%, And again, that was really for all of them. And it does make a difference when you start pulling out. And we haven't even gotten into the volumetric changes within these two, which we will show those as we get a little further along. We can dig into that. It's just so fresh. We haven't had a chance to.
And well, I appreciate these early numbers. Board member.
And kind of along those lines, can you just talk a little bit about how you've communicated the changing fees to water right holders? Part of this is to incentivize and hopefully get them to report more quickly. So are you shared the table of all the different fee penalties that are possible now. Are you communicating that so everyone's as aware as possible of those changes?
We are, but I can't give you the specifics. I'll have to talk to the team a little bit more about, the specific measures they've taken, but we had a pretty big public process as we moved forward with adopting the fees. And then we do notify folks when the reporting is due. Notifications go out when they're going to be coming. So that would have been included in there to let them know that that was happening. I do know that there's going to be additional communication for compliance that the team is working right now to communicate with folks that already are late to remind them of these things. But I can dig in and get a little bit more details on that.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, that'd be helpful.
We don't have any commenters for this item, so it's just here, us at the dais for any discussion. So looking to fellow board colleagues if they'd like to ask any questions, any requests for this update as well. I know we're here really looking to hopefully continue to see wet weather as the water year progresses, but appreciate the update. And I know appreciated the executive order the governor recently issued, and again, all the processing of the temporary groundwater recharge permits. It's really appreciated.
Chair, if I could, I do have one question. I completely agree. I appreciate the expedited processing of the temporary recharge permits. I think one thing that as we go through this process year by year, every year is not a great year for recharge. It kind of depends on hydrology and what opportunities present themselves. So I'm always curious in terms of what do we learn from year to year, and how do we make course corrections and improve the process where it makes sense. And so on this one, I appreciate listing out these permits. One thing that I think we've learned from the past years is that we issue permits, and they could be for a substantial amount of water, but that doesn't always become available and for recharge. And I think it was 2 years ago where we saw quite a bit. We issued significant amount of temporary permits in terms of acre feet of water, and the report back showed only a small amount was actually recharged. So I'm interested in tracking this as we go now that we have these permits out, and it looks like this is all we have for the year. For example, how much water does this look like on paper, and then what do we learn as we go throughout the season in terms of how these opportunities present themselves or don't, depending on how the storms roll in. So just wanted to put a little flag in there. When you come back for future updates, I'll be interested in seeing what we can learn. Thanks.
Yeah, and I know that last year we did have the groundwater recharge team come out and do an update on that, and so I'm sure we could have them do that again when we get to a point where it makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, board member. That now brings us to item number 3, which is another informational item, an update from our Office of Enforcement. Morning, good morning.
Good morning, Chair Esquivel, members of the board. How are you today? Well, I really appreciate being here today. Of course, my name is Yvonne West. I'm the Director of the Office of Enforcement here at the State Water Resources Control Board. And I'm going to be providing you a brief update today about some enforcement highlights from 2024 with a focus on our environmental justice related both initiatives and cases. And I'll wrap up at the end with some short summary of some Office of Enforcement program level enforcement goals. So as you know, the water boards have enforcement authority in a broad range of programs, with our 3 main program areas being water quality, water rights, and drinking water. The Office of Enforcement provides legal and technical support for enforcement across all the water board's program areas, as well as developing statewide enforcement policy and trainings for the water boards. If you can go ahead and click. I'm going to start with our water quality goals, but as just a larger overview, in 2024, the water boards imposed approximately $37 million in liability through administrative judgments, orders, administrative and judicial, judgments, orders, and settlements. So this slide contains some of those highlights from the different program areas, and starting with water quality, you'll see that our regional boards, with support from state board offices and divisions, conducted over 5,000 inspections in the water quality program. We issued over 3,000 enforcement actions, including 165 administrative civil liability orders, totaling over $19 million, with $9 million of that funding going to supplemental environmental projects in the communities that were impacted by those violations. Another thing I wanted to highlight in our water quality enforcement program was that the Office of Enforcement conducted 2 full days of virtual water quality enforcement training this year. Experts from the Office of Enforcement's Legal and technical staff gave presentations on fundamental topics such as inspection procedures and email best practices, as well as some advanced and emerging topics such as the implications of the recent U.S. Supreme Court decision in Sackett versus the United States, which adopted a narrowing definition of waters of the U.S. This training event also featured speakers from United States Environmental Protection Agency and panel discussions led by our regional board colleagues. Nearly 450 water board staff attended both days of this virtual training, so I see that as one of our highlights for that program this year. Next, I'm going to turn to water rights. As you know, water rights enforcement focuses on obtaining accurate and timely diversion and use data and addressing unauthorized diversion and use in flow-impaired watersheds. The Division of Water Rights, among other accomplishments, issued a number of information orders, over approximately 30, in the Scott and Shasta River watershed, as well as the Clear Lake watershed. The orders numbers here, however, doesn't include a significant number, over 180,000 or so, that were issued as part of the Clear Lake emergency regs, which I believe you've heard about other presentations, so I wasn't going to go into them too much. But the division also issued a number of cease and desist orders and administrative civil liability orders this year. Turning to drinking water, if you could go ahead and click, please. The drinking water program, as you know, enforcement focuses on access to safe, clean, affordable water for all of Californians. The Division of Drinking Water implements both the state and the federal Safe Drinking Water Act. And in addition to thousands of formal enforcement actions brought by the Division of Drinking Water, I wanted to highlight that the Office of Enforcement was involved in 2 unique cases this year in assisting the Division of Drinking Water in 2024. The first case, Big Basin Water Company, I can talk about now. And the second case, City of Calexico, will be highlighted later in my presentation when I talk about cases with an environmental justice nexus. So just briefly to touch on Big Basin Water Company, it wasn't a typical enforcement for us. The Office of Enforcement is just getting to the point where we have some resources to assist the Division of Drinking Water with their mission. And Big Basin Water Company was unique. It involved both our drinking water attorneys and our water quality attorneys because it implicated a privately owned drinking water and wastewater system that was damaged in 2020 by the CZU fires. And it was failing due to, in part to this damage and in part to mismanagement of this privately owned system. The Office of Enforcement provided support again to both the Regional Board and the Division of Drinking Water, who, in collaboration with other local county, state, and local agencies, were able to leverage some of the Division of Drinking Water's enforcement tools to have a receiver appointed to the drinking water system, and then voluntarily able to convince the system to go with the same receiver for the wastewater treatment system. And this, in turn, was able to stabilize both the drinking and wastewater systems and provide continued service to this community. So while this was not an EJ environmental justice community or disadvantaged community, it was important. And I believe that the regional board and the state board, Division of Drinking Water, played a crucial role in making sure that service was continued to be provided to this community. I'm going to turn to some of our environmental justice related enforcement initiatives that we spearhead through the Office of Enforcement. The first one I'm going to talk about is our Sanitary Sewer Inspection Initiative, and then I'm going to briefly touch on our Environmental Justice Task Force and our role in that task force. So I'm going to highlight the Sanitary Sewer System Inspection Initiative as an EJ initiative because it involves the use of our available data tools such as CalEnviroScreen to focus compliance inspections on smaller overburdened communities. Conducting these compliance inspections in these communities allows us to identify non-compliance in those communities with the sanitary sewer waste discharge requirements, and subsequent enforcement actions are brought when appropriate to gain compliance in those communities. So the map over here is, of course, from CalEnviroScreen, and it shows our overburdened communities, a percentage of burden kind of throughout the state there. In 2022, the Office of Enforcement Special Investigations Unit, namely in our staff, Jamie Johnson, Jeremy Myers, under Brian Elder, and then now under Thomas Edgars, began this initiative kind of grew a little bit organically. We had a lot of expertise in the Office of Enforcement on collection system inspections, and we thought about how we were going to bring that to the regional boards and spread that knowledge. And so what was developed, or what we embarked on, was an initiative to go region by region and inspect and do these inspections in these communities, in the EJ or overburdened communities, with assistance and accompaniment by regional board staff. So to accomplish this mission, the unit, specifically German Myers, developed a prioritization model that pulls and analyzes information from our California Integrated Water Quality System database. The information it pulls looks at performance indicators such as high peak factors, number of spills over 100 miles, spills to surface water, percentage volume recovered from those spills, and age of infrastructure. It then takes these and analyzes these performance indicators to identify potential collection systems of concern. And once that list is generated, it then focuses the list on smaller overburdened communities with populations serving under 20,000 and with a Cal EnviroScreen score of over 70. So those more overburdened communities. We use this refined list to coordinate with individual regional boards to finalize a target list of systems for inspection. The final coordinated list often includes other collection systems, which were chosen for inspection based on community concerns and complaints or other regional board interests. This is kind of an overview of how this initiative developed and where we are today. So as I mentioned, starting in 2020, the prioritization model was developed. We were able to conduct a small number of inspections to initiate the initiative in Region 3, which resulted in a notice of violation to that system. And then in 2023, we were able to inspect a larger number of systems across multiple regional boards. So in coordination with Region 3, 4, and 5, we were able to conduct 7 inspections with all of those facilities receiving notices of violation. And then 1 additional inspection in Region 3 and 1 additional in 5 based on other regional board interests. And then in 2014, we see the culmination of the initiative in the highest number of inspections to date. We're doing 15 inspections completed across regions 1, 5, 7, 8, and 9. Out of those inspection efforts, we've seen a number of notices of violations and staff enforcement reports, and we anticipate some additional action in 2025 as a result of those inspections. I just want to highlight a few things. This is a breakdown of our 2024 inspections, and the intent of this slide is to really just demonstrate how those efforts break down between the different types of inspections, or why the facilities were identified for inspection. And you can kind of see, just based on this breakdown, again, these are just the numbers for 2024. You can see that the efforts are really weighted towards these small overburdened communities. And with 10 of those inspections occurring in those types of communities. And then I also want to highlight that some of the complaint-based inspections also ended up being in overburdened EJ communities. For example, in Region 5, we were able to inspect East Arosi. This was a unique situation because East Arosi isn't currently enrolled in the sanitary sewer waste discharge permit and subject to those requirements, but they are making efforts to come into compliance. And I think the inspection helped further those efforts and also identify what the weaknesses of that system are. Another highlight that was that in Nyland, we were able to do the same inspection and get them re-enrolled in the sanitary sewer waste discharge requirements permit. And they are working on coming into compliance with those permit requirements right now. One thing you might notice if you're looking at the enforcement column on this spreadsheet is you might notice that there are a lot of notices of violation. And I just want to speak to that. Just generally speaking, while notices of violation are an informal enforcement action, they were chosen for this initiative as a primary first step, and they are really the focus at this point. Because at this stage, we want to bring these communities into compliance without adding any additional financial burden to these smaller communities. And these NOVs have proven to be a good tool for agencies to understand their system's deficiencies and to identify how they can improve their program and come into compliance with their WDRs, their waste discharge requirements. So if we can go to the next slide, this is just some highlights from the initiative and where we're headed in 2025. Again, we increased the number of inspections that we were able to complete in 2024. This was through some efficiencies with the program, as well as working and training with regional board staff. Region 9 is currently undertook 2 inspections of their own, and they are planning to conduct 2 more in the near future. We were able to bring a complaint-based inspection and an environmental justice community back into the sanitary sewer waste discharge permits. And so those were really our highlights. And in 2025, we are, again, going to move forward with inspections in Region 2 and 6. And we hope to use our lessons learned to improve the prioritization model for the next round of inspections in smaller overburdened communities, and really work to keep EJ at the forefront of this initiative. Overall, I think our special investigations unit's efforts have led to a significant increase in the number of collection system inspections completed, not only by our office, but also with the regional boards, in coordination with the regional boards. And they've proven an example of how environmental justice can be incorporated into our work at the staff level by prioritizing efforts in these communities by leveraging our access to data like the CalEnviro screen. So we're looking forward to continuing these efforts. And I do also want to note that that data, the CalEnviro screen data, is used for targeting in other enforcement programs, for example, in Region 9 and Region 4 stormwater. I know they have similar models, and they're using those. I'm going to move on to our Environmental Justice Task Force. The Office of Enforcement represents the water boards in the Environmental Justice Task Force. This is a task force which is a collaboration between US EPA, Cal EPA, and all of the agencies within Cal EPA, and we work together on enforcement and compliance assurance in overburdened communities. The goal of the Environmental Justice Task Force is enforcement engagement that is more transparent, solution-oriented, and responsive to community needs, and more consistent and sustained. So in working to obtain this goal of enhanced, sustained community engagement, the Environmental Justice Task Force works with existing community-led forums that focus on environmental violations, and we're currently working in the pilot communities of Bayview, Hunters Point, Fresno, Kern, and Los Angeles. Our environmental justice liaisons that are assigned to the task force follow up on community complaints. They work across medium, meaning they work whether it's a complaint about air, soil, water, garbage. They work with all of those complaints and various levels of government to seek solutions for the community. They're communicating regularly with the forum's participants regarding their progress and challenges. And these efforts are intended to coordinate and break down government silos and enable speedy mobilization of multi-agency resources to assist these communities. If we go to the next slide, getting into the details of the Environmental Justice Task Force, the Office of Enforcement EJ liaison to the task force is Selena Cole. She represents the water boards for purposes of the task force. She works along with Brian Elder in the office, who is our Office of Enforcement Investigation and Technical Assistance lead. He has an extensive history with the Environmental Justice Task Force program, and together they go into these community meetings, they conduct these inspections, they participate in the Rapid Response Task Force, and they provide transparent information to the communities. So just some of the highlights on this slide. Out of the Rapid Response Task Force, again, this is a multi-agency response to when there's an emergency situation. In 2023, I believe it was, we had a fire at Schnitzer Steel in the Oakland area. We responded with Region 2 as part of the Rapid Response Task Force. And out of those efforts, we have entered into a new, first of its kind, West Oakland Partnership Agreement. And this was recently signed. It is an agreement to engage in ongoing collaborative problem solving with the industry and the community organization West Oakland Environmental Indicators Project. Is joined by US EPA, Cal EPA, Department of Toxic Substance Control, and the state board and the regional board. And we're hoping to see where that goes with this collaborative process to see if we can address the impacts that community is feeling from that facility. The Office of Enforcement, as part of these efforts, attended approximately 7 meetings of these community groups and coordinated and responded to their concerns through information such as activity logs specific to the facilities that were inspected, environmental log books, and then just the community liaison being present and responding directly to the community groups during their meetings. We also conduct enforcement inspections and compliance follow-ups at the facilities of concern. I'm going to take a few minutes to just highlight a few cases that I feel are examples of the type of work we do related to environmental justice communities and how we handle them in an enforcement context. This case isn't a traditional administrative process. This was a judicial action, and it was a longstanding CERCLA case. We were involved, the Office of Enforcement and the LA Regional Board. This litigation was for failure to comply with regional board cleanup orders. We were able to reach an agreement with previous property owners to the site for $9.8 million in settlement. You see this large red square. This shows the site location, and it shows it in Cal EnviroScreen as a disadvantaged community. This is in Compton. And the smaller square has a map of this site. And you can see on that map, there's a blue arrow that shows the down gradient, the way that the groundwater travels and the pollutants from the site travel in the down gradient manner in this area. And you see all of the schools. There's a residential community, about 1.5 miles down gradient of this facility. This was an oil recycling facility, and there's a number of concerns with volatile organic compounds, TCE, and other constituents in the groundwater, in the soils. This is a long-standing case in the sense that the regional board brought a cleanup and abatement order in 2014. The Office of Enforcement got engaged in mediation discussions in 2017. And just this year, we were able to bring it to a resolution for at least some of the responsible parties. The significance of this settlement and the engagement of the regional board was that we were able to ensure that all $9.8 million would be deposited in a trust for soil and groundwater cleanup for this site in this community, to ensure that the money went to the highest need for cleanup and to help mitigate impacts to this community. So I wanted to identify this. It's not our traditional administrative enforcement, which will be the next case, but I think it really was necessary, and we played a vital role, again, for securing those funds for the purpose that they should be put to, which is that community cleanup, or the cleanup of that site. This is an example of more of how environmental justice benefits can be seen through our administrative enforcement actions. This is, again, another Region 4 case, and it's a water quality case against the Los Angeles County Sanitation District. This is a case involving a release of 8.5 million gallons of untreated wastewater into the Dominguez Channel. You can see that fountain of untreated sewage on the top right. There were also 13 other smaller sanitation sewer overflows over the 4 years leading up to this event that were included in the settlement. The settlement includes or allows for $5.9 million of that penalty, that $6 million penalty, to be directed towards a supplemental environmental project in an EJ community. It's a stormwater capture and groundwater recharge project, again, in a historically overburdened community in Callis Park. So this is the attorney part of me. I'm going to say this was just reached, this settlement, and so the project is still in the planning phases, but it is envisioned that it will be a project to capture and pre-treat approximately 13.8 acre feet of stormwater annually, and then infiltrate that stormwater on site to groundwater through bioswales, storage vaults, rain gardens, and infiltration galleries. The project is currently in the planning and design phase, and their hope is that it will be completed by January 2028. It'll include multilingual interpretive signage and displays to help the residents learn about the system and to understand what they can do to improve quality of urban runoff. The park where it is located, where the supplemental environmental project is located, has a disadvantaged communities score within the top 25% in CalEnviro screen, and the track itself, where the park is in the 92nd percentile of the disadvantaged community scale. This is an example, again, of what a more typical administrative enforcement, including a supplemental environmental project, can look like. Under the SEP policy, it allows for up to 100% of the penalty to go towards these types of projects. There is undoubtedly a benefit also to the system in the sense that it reduces the amount of water they'll have to treat during rain events. But I think it's a good example of some of the creative settlement that can happen. As I mentioned, the Office of Enforcement is starting to support the Division of Drinking Water in some of the enforcement actions. This was a different and new type of enforcement for both the division and the Office of Enforcement. It was a joint investigation between the Division of Drinking Water and the Attorney General's Office Environmental Justice Bureau. They were investigating the city of Calexico and their shutoff practices during the COVID pandemic. And it determined that customers in the city of Calexico, which is a disadvantaged community, were being subject to illegal water service shutoffs during the pandemic. The investigation led to a joint settlement with the city of Calexico for violations of the Water Shutoff Protection Act, as well as violations of the State Water Board's arrearages program. I'm highlighting this as a beneficial environmental justice settlement because not only did it include $150,000 in penalties to the state board, it also included $200,000 in water conservation programs to benefit the residents and direct credit of over $50,000 to 484 customers who were wrongfully shut off. In addition, the settlement memorializes increased consumer protections for customers under a new compliant shutoff protection plan that the city is obligated to implement. A related action that happened in the last legislative year, SB 3 was passed. SB 3 was passed by the legislature and the government, and it actually extended the shutoff protection plan to smaller systems starting effective August 1st of 2024. This is an area I'm going to highlight in my next slide because it's an area of growth for our office because of the extension of these obligations under the Shutoff Protection Act to these smaller systems is an area where Office of Enforcement will be focusing in the future. Just going to wrap up on our enforcement goals for 2025. In the water quality program, the Office of Enforcement will be working to address or prevent water quality protection impacts from the Sackett decision, the U.S. Supreme Court Sackett decision. We'll be documenting any impacts that we see from that decision. We'll be working to train staff on how to implement the new narrower definition of waters of the U.S., as well as how to increase our reliance on our state authorities under the Port of Cologne to protect waters of the state from unauthorized discharge and fill violations. In the water rights program, we have worked on drafting with the Division of Water Rights, drafting a water rights enforcement policy, and we'll be coordinating with the division on hopefully the release of a policy for public comment and workshopping in 2025 with the hope of bringing it to the board for consideration and adoption in 2026. And then in the drinking water front, as I had mentioned on my last slide, the Office of Enforcement has gained a few resources to look at Shutoff Protection Act compliance, especially in these smaller systems. We've already received a number of complaints related to shutoffs in disadvantaged in EJ communities through the Environmental Justice Task Force, and we'll be working on developing systems to assess compliance and track compliance, as well as just informing the systems of these new obligations to have a shutoff protection plan in place and to implement it. And so that wraps up my enforcement goals and my presentation that I had for you today, and I'm happy to answer any questions or engage in any discussion.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate the overview here. I know because we're firewalled on individual enforcement actions, we don't often necessarily get as much exposure to the Office of Enforcement as I think sometimes we'd like, but this has been fantastic and just really appreciate you coming up and being able to provide just a flavor of all the work that's going on. Obviously, our enforcement work is a critical arm of our authorities here. It allows us to make sure there's an even playing field out there and that folks are abiding by the regulations that the board has set out. But I particularly appreciate that, enforcement can be a particularly useful tool for communities that have long been burdened disproportionately by pollution, and ultimately help us kind of refine our tools. It's a big state. We're not over-resourced when it comes to this work, and so it always means we're having to prioritize. And so just really appreciate sharing the thoughts and work of the enforcement office here, and think there's just a lot of opportunity, certainly. Appreciate the note on Sackett. And, so much of what you're having to do, like us all, is just continue to adjust to what is an evolving sort of landscape out there insofar as the scope of our federal partnerships, and definitely means that there'll be a lot more dependence and reliance on our authorities here at the state level to continue to maintain and ensure that communities are protected. So just huge thanks and hats off to you and the team and all the work that I know continues to go on quietly out there in the background. And it was really good to see that synthesis as well of, what total penalties were accumulated last year. And I think it'd be helpful as we have further discussions. And I think this is something that, maybe once or twice a year we should definitely, touch base, but would be helpful to see, okay, what's the kind of breakdown amongst the violations and the programs that those enforcement actions are coming from. But just having that synthesis here is just really appreciated, and I think helps give folks an understanding, an impression of the work that the office is doing. So just thanks for your leadership. It's not going to notice, Ms. West. Thank you. Let's go ahead then and call up Angelina Cook.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
My name is Angelina Cook. I am commenting today on behalf of California Sport Fishing Protection Alliance, and I was not sure what this agenda item was necessarily going to entail. So I'm kind of commenting on from more of a generalized standpoint of a member of the general public who has been trying to track California's water law enforcement. And it definitely feels like the enforcement piece is the weak link. Feels like California has all the laws necessary to protect equity and accountability in water use. But there seems to be, when it comes to enforcing the laws, it seems really difficult. I'm coming from a rural perspective. I'm based in McLeod, up at the base of Mount Shasta, very concerned about the environmental injustice of salmon decline and degenerating ecosystems. And so I'm just commenting today, really wanting to encourage a more proactive and comprehensive approach to enforcement. I liked what I heard from the presenter about the Environmental Justice Task Force. I certainly understand and agree with the level of community engagement that's required in the kind of overpopulated, often polluted communities. But I want to encourage you to extend that type of community involvement into the rural communities. I think that, excuse me, the more people understand the challenges that the state is facing in maintaining water quality, and the more opportunities for collaborative participation and solution problem solving, I feel like the water board can start to move more to a position of responsibility. Rather, it feels like you're afraid to be the bad cop, and I don't blame you for that. And if you don't want that role, we need more local participation in a continual manner. I participated from going from the integrated regional water management plan to the sustainable groundwater management. It feels like there's a disconnect in continuity. So anyway, I just want to thank you for this opportunity to learn more about the Water Board's perspective on enforcement, and really let you know that communities want to help you um, ensure water quality and equity for the state. So thank you.
Sorry that there's sort of a perception that I guess we're not willing to enforce. I think the 40 million in penalties shows that there is a lot of enforcement going on, but it is a big state, and we don't have enough boots on the ground to be everywhere at every time. And so, to your point, actually, the public engagement and the public are an important actually continuum of enforcement. And actually, Ms. West was wondering if you could speak to ways that if folks are seeing something that they're concerned about in their community, pollution or discharge otherwise, is there a place that folks can go to raise to the awareness of the Office of Enforcement any issues that, we may be able to help with?
Yeah, of course. I really do appreciate the comments that Ms. Cook brought to the table. It would be great to have engagement in those rural communities as well. Resources are always a constraint, but if you do have concerns, the best way to get them to us is through the Cali EPA complaint portal, which is on their website. It's linked off of our main website. It's linked off of the Office of Enforcement website. It's a little green button that says environmental complaint. And the reason I say that is because that's our best way for tracking it. Because once we get those complaints through that system, we're able to send it not just internally to other Cal EPA agencies if there is, let's say, an air issue or a toxics issue. We also have it linked into some local agencies as well. We can get it to our local agency partners. And we can track it in the sense that, like, if somebody else gets the same complaint, they can go in and get the same information and they can benefit from our investigation. So, our phones, of course, are always an option. You can always call us, but we really do encourage folks to use that website and to use that Cal EPA complaint portal. It is a good way for accountability purposes for us to keep track of complaints coming in. We are somewhat reactive in our enforcement program, and so we are trying to triage and handle incoming complaints. And so if your community does have concern, that's always a good way to get attention.
I know, obviously, with sort of curtailment work that we're doing up in the Scott and Shasta and other more rural reaches of the state, there has been a little more of a presence, but I definitely heard that, again, it's an incredibly large state, and we're dependent upon the partnerships truly in communities to be as effective as we can with the resources we have. And so do encourage folks to reach out and know that we're here to continue to be not just responsive, but to think ahead as well. And I think that that's where, looking at the shifting landscape and federal involvement, et cetera, is important. We're doing our best to stay on top of what is certainly a complicated time. But again, the work that the office is doing is just incredibly appreciated. Board Member Firestone.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for this update and for all the work you all are doing and for highlighting a lot of the EJ work. I feel like there's so much at the water boards that, like the chair said, we don't always see, especially with enforcement being having separation. But there's, as you mentioned, there's also a lot of work going on in some of the other divisions, and so it's hard to get a full overview of, all of the enforcement actions. So Office of Enforcement is obviously the key leadership overall with our enforcement efforts, but there's really, as you mentioned, really important efforts going on within Division of Drinking Water, Division of Water Rights, the regional boards, I'm sure many others. And so it's hard to get that full picture, as the chair was saying. I think, I think we can continue to look at how we can help share that broader view. Because as we heard with the hydrologic update, there's a lot going on just in terms of reporting for water rights, and like you said, on curtailments, and that's really part of an effort to just make our water rights system administrable and functional. So I think that it's important to recognize that, and also just recognize that I, in particular, really appreciate your and the Office of Enforcement's help in working with the divisions in integrating enforcement approaches and strategies for some of the core enforcement work that they do. So, for example, the Division of Drinking Water does mandatory consolidation authority. I think it's been really helpful to be able to work with Office of Enforcement to continue to evolve and strengthen our ability to do that. And I know, the same is true in many other areas. That's just one example. I wanted to highlight the the EJ approach and the sanitary sewer work that you highlighted, and that the office has undertaken, I think is so exciting and important. I'm really appreciative. I think it's a real example of understanding the importance of, making our systems really work for all of California. So, there's, when I think of overburdened communities, they're often also under-resourced and underserved. And you mentioned some examples, but I know, East Arosi is one that I'm super familiar with, where, there's really a need to look at where are are we under regulating? So are there areas that people are there areas of our state that are not falling under our regulatory program at all, where we need to consider that in adopting regulations? But often they do technically fall within our regulatory programs, but if we're not enforcing and working with them so that they understand that and are held to that, then our programs don't exist in practice. And so all of those protections don't exist. And I think that the work to do the enrollment, fine under enrollment, really is about protection and equity and ensuring that our programs work for all Californians. So I just, I'm so excited about that. I think the wastewater needs assessment is also, hand in glove with these efforts in terms of helping us understand where there are underserved communities that and what type of service they have for sanitation and how they fit. So I'm really excited to learn more about how those two are integrating. And I know that staff are working together on that.